Good morning. In today's headlines, voters hit the polls today in an off-year election. Abortion access and marijuana legalization are some ballot issues being decided. We have the details from some key races.
Former President Trump testifies he has no concerns for the banks he allegedly defrauded. He says they made millions from the deals they made with him. Find out why he says his assets were not overvalued.
Renewed calls for a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine. Does the war between Israel and Hamas make that less likely? A law professor gives us some insight.
A new House panel report on government censorship efforts before the 2020 election. Find out why Congressman Jim Jordan calls it a bombshell.
An elderly Jewish man dies after a confrontation at a pro-Israel rally. Hear what police have to say.
The hostages taken by Hamas have been separated from their families for over a month now. Hear one man's story whose wife and children are still missing. Good morning. Welcome to NTD. I'm Kevin Hogan.
Good morning from me as well. I'm Evelyn Lee. Today is Tuesday, November 7th.
Yes, and that is just so sad about that elderly Jewish man.
It is. It is. I mean, it's our hearts definitely go out to the family, and we really hope that, war, it's an extreme time, but we hope that people will not be pushed to either side of extremism, right?
Well, yeah, and the sheriff's office is not ruling out a homicide for this, and they're even considering the possibility that it could have been a hate crime.
Right, and that's serious. Should definitely be investigated.
Yes. And first, we have a quick update. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Japan. He met with Japan's Prime Minister before meeting his counterpart in Tokyo.
During the meeting, Blinken stressed the importance of the G7 uniting in the face of the Israel-Hamas conflict.
The group of 7 nations, as well as the European Union, are meeting today and tomorrow to discuss the Israel-Hamas crisis and Russia's war in Ukraine. A virtual conference with Ukraine's foreign minister is scheduled during the Tokyo meeting. And now moving to Election Day here in the U.S.
Voters today will cast ballots to choose governors in Kentucky and Mississippi, decide legislative control in Virginia and New Jersey, and determine whether the Ohio state constitution should protect abortion access.
NTD's Daniel Monahan breaks down some key races.
Off-year votes get less attention than presidential and midterm congressional elections, but Republicans and Democrats will be watching some major races and key issues for clues about the 2024 elections. First up are races for governor. In Kentucky, Democratic Governor Andy Beshear is running for re-election against Republican State Attorney General Daniel Cameron in the typically conservative state. Cameron is challenging Beshear by focusing on public safety, learning loss from school closures during the COVID pandemic, and legislation opposing cross-sex procedures on minors, which Beshear vetoed. In Mississippi, Republican Governor Tate Reeves is running for re-election against Democrat Brandon Presley, a second cousin of singer Elvis Presley. Reeves has accused Presley of being backed by out-of-state liberals. Presley is running on the promise of tax cuts and expanding Medicaid. Turning to the legislature, all 40 seats in Virginia's Senate and 100 seats in the House of Delegates are up for grabs. Democrats are fighting to hold or widen their 22-18 advantage in the Senate and win a majority in the House, where Republicans have a 52-48 edge. Democrats have focused on abortion access, as Republicans have promised to pass a 15-week abortion ban if they take control of the legislature, while Republicans have focused on crime and public safety. In New Jersey, all seats in the General Assembly and Senate are in play. Republicans have gained ground in the deep blue state since 2021, when they flipped 7 seats. They are campaigning on issues ranging from the economy to parental rights. Over to ballot initiatives, Ohio voters will decide whether to enshrine abortion access rights in the state constitution and on legalizing marijuana for recreational use. And finally, to the courts. The race for a new state Supreme Court justice in Pennsylvania will not alter the liberal tilt of the state's highest court, but could have future implications for abortion access and election laws in the state. Planned Parenthood has endorsed Democratic candidate Daniel McCaffrey for the 10-year position, while pro-life groups are backing the Republican candidate Carolyn Carluccio. Democrats have a 4-2 majority in the partisan state court, with one vacant seat to be filled in this election. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Former President Trump takes the stand. He was the only witness testifying yesterday in the New York civil fraud trial. The judge ruled that he and his 2 sons inflated the value of his assets. But Trump has his own thoughts on the matter. NTD's legal correspondent Arlene Richards reports.
Donald Trump has completed his testimony, but not before telling the judge and the attorney general that this trial is a disgrace. He said the banks were not victims in this case because they made millions of dollars after making deals with his companies, and that the only reason why this case was ever filed is because of politics.
So while Israel is being attacked, while Ukraine is being attacked, while inflation is eating our country alive, I'm down here, and these are all political opponent attack ads by the Biden administration.
Trump repeatedly testified that the property valuations were too low because they didn't include his brand value. But the state attorney said he wasn't interested in talking about brand value. He says Trump's assets were overvalued. On Monday, he focused on estimates from 2014 that showed some values lower than the number in the final statement. When he asked the former president why, Trump said he didn't know because he didn't prepare them.
The numbers are much greater than on the financial statement. We've already proven that. They said Mar-a-Lago's worth $18 million. Mar-a-Lago's worth anywhere from probably 50 to 100 times more than that.
So why were the valuations higher in the final statement than they were in the notes? Trump said there's no such thing as overvalued. He said that a property is as valuable as the next wealthy person who buys it. For example, he said a property he owns in New York City is in a prime location. So it's more valuable than the number in the 2014 statement because 2 companies want to buy it. But he isn't selling it. He said those companies would be willing to pay a lot more money for the property than the value that was placed on it, and that this is just one of many methods that are used to estimate value. Numerous times, Judge Arthur Engoron threatened to rule against Trump's testimony because his responses often became narratives. For example, Trump attacked the judge and the attorney general for bringing what he called a ridiculous case.
And it's a terrible, terrible thing. These are political operatives that I'm going to be dealing with right now. You have a racist attorney general who made some terrible statements, and you'll see some more that came over the wires today. It's a very sad situation for our country. We shouldn't have this.
The state attorney wrapped up his questioning before the end of the day. He plans to call Trump's daughter Ivanka to the stand on Wednesday. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds has endorsed Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
Reynolds said yesterday that DeSantis stands a better chance of winning the general election than former President Trump.
We are living in unprecedented times, and there is just too much at stake. Our country is in trouble. The world is a powder keg. And I'm here to tell you, without a doubt, that Ron DeSantis is the person that we need leading this country. Ron is the person who will fight for you. Ron is the person who will not back down, who will have the moral conviction to do what's right and the ability to actually do what he promises.
The Iowa governor emphasized the importance of electing a candidate capable of defeating President Joe Biden and someone who has the skill and resolve to reserve what she calls the madness going on in the country.
Reynolds also said the country needs someone who puts America first and not himself. The Iowa governor also seemed to touch on abortion, saying DeSantis is someone who knows when life begins and thinks it's a beautiful thing to save a beating heart.
The endorsement by Reynolds comes just over 2 months before Republicans in the state will hold their caucus.
DeSantis has staked the future of his campaign to a strong showing in the Hawkeye state.
The battle is on to replace the House GOP vice chair position recently vacated by newly elected Speaker Mike Johnson.
6 candidates are now vying for the elected position, including 3 women and 3 men.
The 6 candidates are Representatives Mark Alford, Beth Van Doon, Michelle Fishback, Nicole Meliotakis, Brian Mast, and Mike Collins. An election date has yet to be announced, but is believed to be next week.
The vice chair position involves communicating the GOP message and assisting with party conferences. The vice chair also sits on the steering committee, which chooses committee assignments. While the vice chair spot is a meaningful party position, it typically isn't a stepping stone to higher office.
Once again, the clock is ticking to fund the government. After a shutdown was barely averted in September, the issue was kicked down the road with a short-term funding measure that ultimately got former Speaker Kevin McCarthy ousted from his job.
So how is new Speaker Mike Johnson handling this challenging task? Here's NTD's Melina Weisskopf with more from Capitol Hill.
The House is returning to take up their appropriations bills right now. The House has passed 7 appropriations bills. The Senate has passed around 3, but Speaker Johnson over the weekends predicted that Congress would not be able to tackle all 12 of these appropriations bills by next Friday's deadline. Now the Speaker is proposing to pass a continuing resolution that is a short-term government funding bill that would expire sometime in January. But the question with Johnson's proposed continuing resolution is whether or not it would be a traditional one. He's also floating the idea of passing a laddered approach. That so-called laddered approach would be more complex. It would divide up this entire government funding bill to only extend funding for certain government agencies with different timelines. But considering how complex and intricate that would be, there is a question of whether or not that is doable, especially on such a short timeline. We're looking at right now just 1 week's time. Now the big question is, how will Speaker Johnson be able to handle such a dicey topic as government funding and a continuing resolution, which is something that many Republicans are routinely opposed to? And this is also the very thing that was the last straw that got McCarthy ousted just a few weeks ago. But there is one big difference between Johnson and McCarthy. That is that Johnson seems to have more trust in the Republican Party, especially from those who were always skeptical of McCarthy. And one big example of that trust is the fact that Johnson did not have to make any concessions in order to take the Speaker's gavel like McCarthy did. Here's how Chip Boy puts it.
A limited government conservative that believes we ought to restrain and cut spending, that we ought to do our job to secure the United States. And I think he was clear about that. So we have a lot of confidence that we're all on the same page about what we're trying to do.
So it will be interesting to see how Republicans in the House are now voting on a CR under this new leadership. And remember, it's not as simple for Johnson as just getting his own party in line here. He also has to work with the Democrat-controlled Senate and President Biden in the White House to avoid a government shutdown come next week. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Just ahead, a month into the war, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will consider tactical hour-long pauses in the war in the Gaza Strip.
U.S. senators and diplomats pressing for a 2-state solution in the Middle East. Is this possible after the October 7th terrorist attack by Hamas? A law professor tells us.
The U.S. is preparing to send precision-guided bombs to Israel as the war on Hamas continues in the Middle East.
An elderly Jewish man died after a confrontation with pro-Palestinian protesters in California. Find out what police have to say.
Like sweet tasting wine, your lips you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you do when your tire goes flat and there's no air anywhere? You reach for Bullseye Pro, the smarter, faster, hands-free way to fill it up with air. Bullseye Pro is equipped with a rechargeable lithium-ion power plant. So fast and so convenient. It's like the power of an air compressor in the palm of your hand. Look, you can inflate all 4 tires on a single charge. It has a built-in smart pressure digital sensor that gauges and automatically stops when the set tire pressure is reached. Easily inflate pool toys, exercise balls, and more. Call or go online now and get the complete Bullseye Pro inflation system for the factory direct price of just $79.99. Plus, we'll ship your entire order free, and we'll give you a 50% discount on a second one. Order now.
To order, call 1-800-984-7221. That's 1-800-984-7221, or go to getbullseyepro.com.
The greatest threat facing the United States is the CCP.
The Epoch Times investigation team had studied the CCP for years, but what we uncovered was yielding evidence beyond our imagination.
With Chairman Mao, with the Prime Minister, our talks have been characterized by frankness.
The Clinton administration said, oh, don't worry about it. This will be a poison pill for China.
China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has 4 enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving of our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.
Good to have you back. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will consider tactical, hour-long pauses in the war in the Gaza Strip.
Netanyahu told ABC that Israel has done such pauses before and that it's already facilitating humanitarian aid with the U.S. He said circumstances could be checked for a pause here and there to let goods in and hostages out.
Netanyahu says President Biden agrees a ceasefire would be a victory for Hamas and hamper the war effort. The terrorist group says it will not free hostages or stop fighting while Israel's offensive is ongoing.
Meanwhile, Israel's military says it has Gaza City encircled. It shared videos of ground operations and airstrikes on moving targets overnight. It says a Hamas compound was seized and that soldiers were set to bring the fight into underground tunnels.
It also shows a strike on a building next to a hospital where it says an attack was being planned. The army says a secondary explosion indicated a Hamas weapons cache was hidden in the civilian area. The U.S. is planning to transfer $320 million of precision-guided bomb equipment to Israel. The equipment was approved several months ago before Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. The transfer comes as several countries have called for a ceasefire in Gaza as a civilian death toll from Israeli airstrikes continue to rise. Senior U.S. officials have urged Israel to agree to humanitarian pauses to allow aid into and civilians out of Gaza. The U.S. has stopped short of calling for a ceasefire, arguing that it would benefit Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected any stop to the fighting. That's until Hamas releases the more than 200 hostages it's holding inside Gaza. Senator Bernie Sanders is refusing to condemn remarks by Progressive Representative Rashida Tlaib.
Sanders went to bat for Tlaib on CNN over her position. She is accusing President Biden of supporting genocide in Gaza. Sanders deflected questions about Tlaib with responses about former President Trump and the unconfirmed death toll in Gaza. He said, quote, "We don't have to quibble about words."
Sanders says he hopes the Israeli people get rid of Netanyahu and elect a leader that can move Israel toward a two-state solution.
And we're going to learn more about the viability of a two-state solution with Ronald Rishlak, a distinguished professor of law at the University of Mississippi and author of the book Disinformation. Ronald, thank you for coming on the show today. How has the war between Israel and Hamas made the possibility of a two-state solution even less likely?
Well, trying to bring two people together when they're in the middle of battle is particularly difficult. It's enticing, so it's something we think would sound like a good solution in the long run. However, it's really hard, just first of all, to stop the fighting.
And when we think about a two-state solution, that would mean that there would be a sovereign Palestinian state just outside or near or even in Jerusalem. How is that possible, given that the opportunity for Hamas to govern such an area, if they're not eradicated by Israel, would pose a direct threat to the Israelis?
It's extraordinarily difficult. The problem is it's good in the ideal. If we think about if we could get to this point where people could live together in harmony, it would be wonderful. But when you sit down, and this has been discussed for decades, and you talk about where you draw the lines, how you establish the authority, what rights exist for which group, it becomes extraordinarily difficult. It's a situation where about 40%, both of the Jews and the Palestinians, favor it. In other words, a majority don't even favor the idea. So we're not anywhere near having this accomplished.
Let's break this down here. A two-state solution would probably be very difficult, considering that Hamas has already stated that its goal is to eradicate Israel. But would a war that eradicates Hamas pave the way for a future with peace if there is not another group that comes in with the same goals?
That's sort of the situation. We end up with a two-state solution, or we have capitulation, or we have devastation of one of the two parties. I mean, that's why two-state solution sounds so attractive, because it's the most peaceful, nice-sounding solution we have. But you're right. As long as Hamas is there, Israel is threatened. Many Palestinians feel threatened by Israel. And the ability of trying to get these people to sit down and not just work a little bit together, but to live peacefully next to one another over the course of decades is a very ambitious goal.
So Ronald, before this whole war era, is it the case that the two-state solution was effectively ended when Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank expanded?
The settlements are a difficulty for the Palestinians, certainly. These are Jewish settlements in the middle of the West Bank, and I guess elsewhere, but I'm most familiar, visited one in the West Bank, where Jewish people claim their homeland and have moved back and established cities, and they're fully functioning cities in the Palestinian area. And the Palestinians view this as a tremendous intrusion. So that would be an important element that would have to be resolved. Would those cities get to remain, or would the Jewish people have to leave, which the Palestinians would favor? So that is a stumbling block.
Is there a difference between the Israeli concept of a two-state solution and that of Palestinians?
I think there's a difference that almost everyone has. Yes, do we have two peoples living side by side with completely separate entities? Do we have people working together in essence the same geographic area with separate political entities, but not really the fine political borders we expect usually with nations? It's not just the Israeli-Palestine viewpoint. It's almost individual by individual what people are thinking about when they talk about the two-state solution.
And Ronald, just briefly here, why are American diplomats like Secretary of State Antony Blinken and U.S. senators like Bernie Sanders calling for a two-state solution now?
Israel is very important to the United States. It always has been, and certainly I think since its reestablishment after World War II, it's been our greatest ally in the region, and so we're very concerned about it. We would like to have a peaceful resolution, a peaceful era for the Middle East, and that always seems the most attractive of all the possibilities. It's just not particularly practical, and it's going to be very hard to accomplish.
Distinguished Professor of Law at the University of Mississippi and author of Disinformation, Ronald Rychlak, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thousands came out to support Israel yesterday at an event held in New York's Central Park.
The New York Stands with Israel gathering was put together by the UJA Federation of New York. The CEO of the group said Senator Chuck Schumer were among the speakers.
We will always remember what happened that day, but too many around us have already sought to forget, to deny, to contextualize what must be unequivocally condemned.
In every generation they have risen to afflict us, but in every generation the Jewish people fight back.
In videos shared by the organization, people are seen waving Israeli flags and chanting, "Bring them home." The Hamas terror group is still holding over 200 hostages in Gaza. Many are children and several are American citizens.
Stranger Things actor Brent Gelman and other Hollywood celebrities took part in the event. In a sign of fearful environment, Jewish people currently face no strollers, backpacks, or large parcels were permitted. A 69-year-old Jewish man died after an altercation at a pro-Israel rally in California yesterday. The Ventura County Sheriff's Office has determined the death was a homicide and is not ruling out hate crime charges. Police say Paul Kessler got into an argument with a pro-Palestinian supporter on Sunday. During the altercation, Kessler fell backward and later died of what police are calling blunt force trauma. No suspect has been named. Police are asking for help in their investigation and plan to hold a press conference today. The incident happened as emotions are running high in the U.S. over the war between Israel and the Hamas terrorist group. The Ventura County Sheriff's Office will hold a press conference today at 1 p.m. Eastern Time about the event.
A New York public defender will keep her job after being caught tearing down posters of Israeli hostage children.
Her employers at the New York County Defender Services say she has apologized to her colleagues and promised to do better.
The video of Victoria Ruiz allegedly tearing down the posters was shared on X by the group Stop Antisemitism. It received over 6 million views and sparked an online petition. It called for Ruiz's dismissal over her alleged biased behavior and inability to fulfill her duties without prejudice.
A spokesperson for the NYCDS strongly condemned her actions as highly insensitive. However, after a review and a pledge to do better, the organization accepted her apology. The statement noted that Mrs. Ruiz has not yet made a public apology for the incident.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that they, in the end, kind of made up, and because I just think, you know, like I said, in war, it's such extreme times, there is such extreme narratives. But I think we should be careful to not fall into this kind of binary thought. Even if you choose to be pro-Palestine, it doesn't mean that you're anti-Israel, right? And vice versa.
Yeah,
but
and
there's so many actors at play, so it's just something so much more complicated than that.
Yeah, and on the international stage, that's something that we see in the two-state solution, you know, hope for peace, and hopefully that can translate here in the United States as a mutual way to come together and talk about things and live in harmony. Because we've seen a rise in hate crimes before this war, too. So now hopefully that those can be curbed even afterwards.
That's true. And just one last note, that the son of Hamas's founder was actually saying that Hamas is more dangerous than ISIS, and he said the reason why is because Hamas had the capability to divide the nation like that, which other terrorist groups were not.
That is a really striking reveal. Stay with us. We're going to break a new House panel report on government censorship efforts before the 2020 election. Find out why Congressman Jim Jordan calls it a bombshell.
Senate Republicans rolling out an overhaul for border security. Is it a good plan? A director at an immigration policy organization answers this and whether Democrats will support it.
I use Book a Limo on all my trips. They have drivers everywhere.
I always feel safe when I travel with their chauffeurs, from hello to goodbye.
Checking rates, booking, and managing clients' reservations online is so easy.
The confirmations, trip reminders, and car status updates are great when I'm on the go.
I want my clients to have the best experience during their trip. That's why I've used Book a Limo for the past 30 years.
What's your destination? Book a limo, any car, anywhere.
Did you know ESG is impacting every part of your life? From rising gas prices to global food shortages to out-of-control inflation, even losing your freedom of speech and being censored on the internet. It's all being driven by ESG ideology. Who's in control? What can you do about it? Find out in The Shadow State, the first documentary exposing ESG. The ESG movement of governments and corporations operates in the shadows. Only the light of truth can expose it. Watch The Shadow State documentary, streaming now.
Y'all know me. Every day I'm hustling. I'm grinding and making deals because a girl loves her bling. But the one thing I don't have to hustle for is paying for expensive car repairs, thanks to CarShield. Plans through CarShield can protect up to 6,000 parts and systems in your car, including the engine, transmission, air conditioner, entertainment system, and more. That's right. CarShield administrators get cover repairs paid on the most expensive parts of your car, all for one low monthly rate that never goes up, for as long as you cover your car. That's their price lock guarantee.
I want to keep my car on the road as long as possible, and CarShield administrators helps me do that.
I trust CarShield administrators because they paid my claim.
Being an essential worker and a mom of 3, finances can be very tight at times. If it wasn't for CarShield, I wouldn't have my car.
And with their best coverage ever, CarShield administrators go the extra mile, including car rental options. You'll also get 24/7 coast-to-coast roadside assistance for flat or damaged tires, lockouts, dead batteries, and courtesy towing, all at no additional cost to you. That's right. You don't need to do any hustling for these extras. They're all included.
The cost will break down, there's no doubt about it. That's just the way it is. I got stuck with high repair bills before. That's why I called CarShield.
Nobody likes expensive car repair bills. That's why you have to call CarShield before you break down.
Darlings, if you want to be smart and get those car repairs paid, then call CarShield now. Leave the hustling to the professionals. Pick up that phone right now before your car breaks down.
Protect yourself from the unprecedented rise in cost for parts and repairs. Call now to save money with your price lock guarantee. Call 800-418-7697. 800-418-7697. 800-418-7697.
Welcome back. A group of GOP senators has unveiled a new plan outlining an overhaul of current border policies. The main points of the proposal include restarting border wall construction and deeming large numbers of migrants ineligible for asylum. The plan would also revive the Remain in Mexico policy, which requires migrants to wait in Mexico while their immigration case is heard. Some Democrats have said they won't accept any plan containing that measure. The proposal would also make migrants ineligible for asylum if they came through a different country before arriving in the U.S. Republicans might try to include increased border security as part of Biden's package of aid for Ukraine and Israel. And we're going to learn more about this border overhaul proposal with Jessica Vaughn, the Director of Policy Studies at the Center for Immigration Studies. Jessica, it is great to speak with you again. Good morning.
Good morning.
What parts of this proposal by Senate Republicans create an orderly process for migrants who are actually at an advantage and have a reason to be in the United States to be here, and for ones who don't, to be relocated to the appropriate place?
Well, I think the most critical part of this is the reform to the asylum policies, where they're going to create they're proposing to create a more meaningful initial screening and to clarify who exactly would qualify for asylum. And the effect of that would be to weed out so many of the frivolous and false claims to asylum that are clogging up the system. And that will make it possible for the people who would qualify for asylum to have their cases heard much more quickly and to get protection, to access those protections that we want to provide. But it really just cleans up and modernizes the system and prevents exploitation of it.
Yes, the United States serves as an international bastion of hope for those seeking asylum, so that is very important. But is forcing migrants to apply for asylum at border points of entry legal according to U.S. and international law?
Well, certainly it would be under U.S. law because our Constitution says that Congress creates immigration law. So it's certainly, if that's what Congress decides to do, that is the law. With respect to international law, I don't think it would be in conflict. There may be some people who object, but if that's the case, if it runs afoul of international law or treaties that we have signed, then that's the time for us to reevaluate whether we need to be a part of that treaty, because it simply is common sense that we want people to avoid crossing illegally and with the help of criminal organizations and funnel them to the legal ports of entry so that this can be an above board and legal process to protect people.
Thanks for clearing that up, Jessica. Are the parole guidelines in this proposal reasonable, making it over 1 year with a possible extension for 1 more year?
Well, it's better than the system we have now, but I actually think that what they're proposing is unnecessarily generous because parole is supposed to be for people who have an immediate emergency need to come to the United States for some short period of time, like for medical treatment or to testify in a criminal case or something like that. And typically that's not going to take a year. I think what they should do instead is set it to the needs of that individual case and say, okay, it's going to be for a few weeks or maybe longer, but tailor it to the needs of people. But it definitely would be better than the system that the Biden administration has implemented, where they're using it as an alternative to our legal immigration system. And that is contrary to the law.
I see what you mean, a more custom-tailored approach to streamline this process. So they want to bring back Remain in Mexico. Does that facilitate a means of effectively determining if their asylum claims are valid even better?
Well, it makes it a better system in that it will deter all of the people who are trying to game the system and make a false claim or a frivolous claim just to get into the United States. So if those cases are weeded out of the system and people have to stay in Mexico for the duration of their proceedings, then there are going to be fewer people trying to do this, and there'll be more good cases and we can adjudicate them faster, and it's going to clear out the backlog in the immigration system. So I think in that sense, yes, it is going to help the deserving cases get that protection faster.
So, Jessica, Democrats have said that Remain in Mexico is a deal breaker for them. Is there any way that this proposal will get bipartisan support?
Well, if they're paying attention to what voters want to see happen, then they should support it, because something like 60 to 70% of voters are concerned about the border and want the system fixed. Senate leadership is going to be very opposed to this, and they're going to dig in. But I think this is really a good starting place for negotiations. And if we want to keep the government running, this really should be a part of the negotiations for the spending bills that are coming due in the coming months. And I think that Democrats are going to have to go along with some of this if they want to keep the government running.
Well, very clear and sensible analysis on this. Jessica Vaughn, Director of Policy Studies at the Center for Immigration Studies, thank you.
Thank you.
House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan says the federal government and so-called disinformation experts worked with big tech before the 2020 election to censor speech online.
Jordan says the House panel report released yesterday is a bombshell. And NTD's Jeremy Sandberg tells us why.
An interim staff report titled The Weaponization of Disinformation, Pseudo-Experts and Bureaucrats, How the Federal Government Partnered with Universities to Censor Americans' Free Speech, was released by the House Judiciary Committee on Monday. Jordan called out the Department of Homeland Security, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, the State Department, and academics at Stanford University. He says hundreds of secret reports uncovered a joint censorship effort with big tech before the 2020 presidential election. and that communications showed true information, jokes, and opinions were targeted. Jordan says a partnership was set up called the Election Integrity Partnership, or EIP, and shared an email from an EIP member stating it was created at the request of DHS and CISA. The report calls it a consortium of disinformation and says pressure was largely directed one way. Republicans and conservatives were largely being flagged with misinformation, while false information from Democrats and liberals went largely untouched. The report called it a pseudoscience being used to frequently target communities and individuals with opposing views of current narratives. Some of the posts flagged were from then-President Trump, North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis, Representatives Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, Fox News host Sean Hannity, and satirical media site The Babylon Bee, along with posts from other media organizations and everyday Americans. The report says the federal government's effort was to censor Americans engaged in core political speech leading up to the 2020 election, under CISA's Countering Foreign Influence Task Force. CISA Executive Director Brandon Wales told Fox News the agency does not and has never censored speech or facilitated censorship. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
The Supreme Court is set to hear an appeal on a gun ownership case today. An appeals court previously ruled in favor of Zaki Rahimi. He's challenging a federal gun law that bars people with domestic violence restraining orders from owning a firearm. Rahimi is currently in prison for owning guns after a violent altercation with his girlfriend. He's also taken part in 5 different shooting incidents in Texas. That's led some Second Amendment advocates to say he's not the ideal face to challenge the law. Rahimi himself issued a letter over the summer saying he no longer wanted to own firearms and that he plans to turn his life around when he's released. Stay with us. The Department of Justice is taking the airline company JetBlue to court over their planned merger with Spirit Airlines. Find out why.
And the latest development in AI wars, Elon Musk introduces a new chatbot called Grok. What makes it special?
When I drink it, the first thing was I feel the warmth in my tummy. It's kind of like gently radiating out, a kind of a very comforting warmth. And it was really good, actually. I felt much better. I did feel, actually, an effect. And I find that it is actually better when I take it regularly.
It's actually steamed and dried 9 times. And so it's really, the essence is really extracted.
Then the second time I tried it really like on an empty stomach and just 2 teaspoons of it and over a few times. And wow, that was a big difference because suddenly I could feel, wow, I was very good energized. I didn't have to eat. I could work outside in the garden for a couple of hours and I still felt very well. And I was impressed by that. So I think it's a good product.
William Bouguereau's staggering work, both in quantity and quality, numbered over 800 exquisite paintings during his lifetime.
Bouguereau was the most famous artist in all of France, possibly all of Europe. These are emotionally powerful works, amongst the most powerful in art history.
我第一次看到就是布格罗的画的时候，我就感觉到非常的震惊。我觉得哇，居然有人画到这么的完美，所有的一切都无可挑剔。
In this episode, we'll investigate the talent of a genius and a true master in his field who was first highly praised and recognized, but later destroyed. What was it about him or his art that made an entire society turn against him and banish both his name and his works?
Welcome back. JetBlue CEO Robin Hayes testified in court yesterday defending the JetBlue Spirit Airlines merger.
And here with us live to discuss this is NTD business host Don Ma. Don, good morning. It's great to have you on. So what was Hayes' argument for the proposed $3.8 billion acquisition of Spirit Airlines?
Well, first of all, just in case anyone forgot, the deal is being challenged by the Department of Justice in federal court in Boston. Hayes says that this deal is actually a critical part of his plan, and it's the only way to turn the airline into a more significant competitor to the four largest U.S. airline carriers like Delta, United, American Southwest. These four, they control around 80% of the domestic market, whereas JetBlue only controls roughly 5% of market share. So Hayes says that he has long believed that, quote, consolidation among the smaller airlines was in some ways inevitable. That's what he says, to compete with the larger airlines.
So would it have been possible for JetBlue to grow bigger without that, to compete with the big four airlines?
That's a good question, but it seems like Hayes doesn't think that's a possibility, though. He said in court yesterday that you would never get to the size the big four are based on organic growth. He said that if you actually recall, the big four airlines didn't get there through organic growth. They actually did so through mergers as well and acquisitions. So, you know, I think some competition could be good in terms of competing with the major airlines. But, you know, you never know for sure. But it seems like the Justice Department actually argues that passengers would suffer from the JetBlue Spirit Airline merger, roughly $1 billion in net harm annually because of rising fares if JetBlue absorbs Spirit.
Well, if there is some competition among the big boys there, then hopefully that can bring down prices a little bit for us, especially as the holidays come up here. So do you have anything else for us, Don?
Yeah, you're right. But besides that, it seems like WeWork, the office space leasing company, has filed for bankruptcy. The company was once valued as high as $47 billion. In their bankruptcy filing, the company said it has liabilities ranging from $10 to $50 billion. WeWork shares were trading at about 83 cents before the stock was halted yesterday. So one of the reasons that was attributed to the company's downfall is the post-pandemic slump, which forced many companies to end their leases. But other than that, it seems like some bank customers as well have not received their direct deposit checks since last Friday. The delays are linked to a problem, it seems like, with the automated clearinghouse payment system. It's causing headaches for customers, consumers, employees. The clearinghouse company is owned by over 20 banks, including Wells Fargo, Citibank, and others. The delay has caused problems with automated payments like rent, mortgage, and credit cards. So while the problem is a result of human error, TCH says the issue affects less than 1% of its customers. It said it was working to fix the problem as quickly as possible. Banks are saying customer money is secure. Other than these two updates, that's all from me this morning.
Since last Friday really highlights some questions about our payment infrastructure. But thank you so much, Don Ma, host of NTD Business. I appreciate it, as always.
Thank you.
Elon Musk's new AI chatbot is out. After just 8 months in development, Musk calls it Grok. NTD's Faye Quarter has the details.
Elon Musk has officially released Grok, xAI's new AI chatbot, the latest large language model to enter the AI wars, joining the likes of ChatGPT, Claude, Inflection, and Llama.
What makes this really different and unique and quite exciting is it's pulling from near
real-time data.
Chris Duffy is the head of AI strategy at Adobe. He says Grok draws data from X, the social media platform formerly known as Twitter. Musk owns X, so it acts as an exclusive source of information only Grok can use. Information that can be more up-to-date than what's on the rest of the internet. Musk posted a side-by-side example showing that Grok knows Joe Rogan wore a blonde wig during his interview with Musk on October 31st. Another AI program couldn't provide that information because it didn't have access to the latest data from X. XAI says Grok is modeled after The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a popular science fiction book series in which a main theme is the search for the ultimate answer to life, the universe, and everything. XAI says that Grok is therefore intended to answer almost anything. It wants Grok to maximally benefit all of humanity and be used by people of all backgrounds and political views. Musk has repeatedly said that OpenAI's ChatGPT has a far-left bias, and that he wants to create a truth-seeking AI that counters it. Musk also believes AI could threaten humanity's existence, but is developing AI anyway.
One of the best ways to prevent some of the unintended consequences is to be part of the change. And so here it's pulling from a lot of great, leading experts who helped craft this over the last 4 or 5 or so months. And I think it's a valid, worthwhile attempt into helping propel this category going forward.
Duffy believes Musk's concerns are warranted, but says that we should still be optimistic, though cautiously so, about the future. Right now, only a limited number of verified X users can access Grok. In the future, it may become a feature of X Premium Plus, which is $16 a month. Faye Quarter, NTD News.
Stay with us. Hostages taken by Hamas terrorists in the October 7th attack have been separated from their families for over a month now. Hear one man's story whose wife and kids are still missing.
What does history, both ancient and modern, tell us about Israel's right to exist? We hear from a political risk analyst about Israel's past that stretches back into biblical times.
I use Book a Limo on all my trips. They have drivers everywhere.
I always feel safe when I travel with their chauffeurs, from hello to goodbye.
Checking rates, booking, and managing clients' reservations online is so easy.
The confirmations, trip reminders, and car status updates are great when I'm on the go.
I want my clients to have the best experience during their trip. That's why I've used Book a Limo for the past 30 years.
What's your destination? Book a limo, any car, anywhere.
Kindness is cool. Because we feel happier when we do good. Kindness connects us with others and improves our self-esteem. Simple actions, meaningful lives. Let's practice kindness, share our love, and show our care for one another. Submit videos of kindness to Gangjing World for prizes up to $10,000 in cash. For more information, visit gangjingworld.com.
Is deep-sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritang Green Vegetable Omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals, especially vitamins A, D, E, calcium, and iron. With natural processing and no harmful chemical additives, it has more than 90% concentration of omegas 3, 6, 7, and 9. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritang Omega-3 does not smell of fish and contains no pollutants, so both adults and children can safely and easily consume it over a long period of time. Puritang Green Vegetable Omega-3. Greener, healthier, and more effective. Visit puritang.com to learn more.
Be right there. Wait. Use the shovel and bucket of water, remember? Drown, stir, drown, feel. Then make sure it's cool.
Where'd you learn that?
SmokeyBear.com. Brushed up on some tips before we left. Don't want to start a wildfire, right?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome back, and it seems like we have some issues, unfortunately, with our prompter here, so let's head into the next package without announcing it, unfortunately.
We do have some tough news to break here. It's been 31 days of a waking nightmare for this gentleman, and he's seen his wife and young children who were taken hostage by Hamas during the October 7th attacks. And it was his family dog who joined him during what now has become a daily ritual for Israelis calling on leaders for the hostages' release. Let's hear his story.
It's been over 31 days of waking nightmare for Overhaul Brodich. 31 days since he last spoke to his wife or saw his 3 young children, aged 10, 8, and 4 years old. 31 days since the October 7th attacks by Hamas on Israel, which kidnapped and took his family hostage.
It's been so long, I'm starting to lose it. I don't know in what situation they are in, health-wise, or if they're being fed, taken care of. So I can only hope that everything's all right.
Brodich's family was taken from one of the hardest hit communities, Kfar Aza. They were hiding in a safe room with their neighbor's daughter, whose parents were killed. He had gone outside to see if he could help stop the gunmen, but they got separated. At first, he thought everyone but his dog was killed before he received confirmation they were taken. He started camping with his dog outside the Israeli Defense Ministry with a sign to remind the military, "My family is in Gaza." Others have joined him in what's become a daily occurrence.
All day, this is what I'm doing. I talk to people and I tell them my story and my beliefs, and I just keep on going, and nighttime comes and I just fall asleep, maybe I don't fall apart, but I just fall asleep, from all this, and get so tired. So I just wanted them to see, the decision makers, to know that I'm there and my family is held hostage. So whenever they make their big decisions, they think about me, and I think they are thinking about me right now. They can't ignore me.
After a month, Brodich is tired of protesting, but he says views of the war are changing.
I think it has changed a lot. People did change their views on this conflict. Everybody just wanted vengeance at first. I don't think, they wanted retaliation, which is human, I guess, but I hope it ends, just a cycle that keeps going on and on. And now I'm a part of it, and my kids and wife are a part of it. And they shouldn't be.
Heartbreaking to hear, but our hearts go out to all the victims.
Yes, and hopefully their family will be reunited soon. And now we're going to delve into the history surrounding the State of Israel and what this tells us about its legitimacy. Earlier, I spoke with Anders Corr, a publisher at the Journal of Political Risk and principal at Core Analytics, to learn more. Check it out. Anders Corr, thank you for your time today. What does history tell us about Israel's right to exist?
It goes way back to biblical times. The Jewish people in Israel had lived there for centuries and centuries, millennia. They were forced out, suppressed, migrated throughout the Middle East and Europe. And then after World War I, when the Ottomans lost, so the Ottoman Empire during World War I, allied with the German aggressors, essentially. They lost. The British took over Palestine as a mandate from the League of Nations. And what occurred then is that the British were basically welcoming Jewish people back to Israel if they wanted to come, because Jewish people in Palestine had been for so long suppressed. They were treated like second-class citizens by the Ottoman Empire, but allowed to exist to a certain extent. So I think you had about 10% of Palestine as Jewish during the Ottoman Empire. So because the Jews in Europe were fleeing anti-Semitism, which was very extreme to the point of pogroms and ghettos, ghettoization of Jewish people, there was talk of returning them forcibly into ghettos. And so during the 19th century, that gave rise to this movement in Europe to return to the land of Israel. They were simply migrants, really peaceful migrants who were, yes, they wanted to form their own state. They had that idea, but at the time they were peaceful migrants, and they were starting, purchasing land and things from Palestinians and Arabs voluntarily.
So, Anders, we've established that Israel has a right to exist, but Hamas doesn't seem to think so, given that it slaughtered over 1,000 civilians in a terrorist attack on the country. So what should Israel be doing in response?
Well, Israel's correct in defending itself. And every community needs to defend itself, as we know. And they're correct in defending themselves. I argue that they're going a little bit too far in terms of attacking. I think that what they're doing in terms of cutting off electricity and water to Gaza is unfortunate and probably violates the laws of war and international law generally. You can't target civilians by cutting off their access to food, water, and electricity. The IDF, of course, counters that. The Israeli Defense Force counters that Hamas actually has some fuel stored in Gaza that they could use to power the hospitals and things. I don't know if that's true, but that's the claim by the IDF.
And Anders, we have seen Israel take steps to prevent fuel from going into Gaza out of fears that Hamas would use it to fuel their rockets that are used to strike civilians. Anders Kaur, principal at Core Analytics, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Really good breakdown there.
Yeah, the land of Israel has such a deep, rich history, and of course, the Israelis are doing what they can to preserve that.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for this addition. So this is the part where we kick off the second part of our broadcast. The Chinese regime-owned app TikTok is back under scrutiny. The social media platform is being accused of pushing anti-Israel propaganda. We speak to an expert to find out more.
The U.S. is preparing to send precision-guided bombs to Israel as the war on Hamas continues in the Middle East.
Today is Election Day. There are races for governor and important ballot measures regarding abortion access, marijuana legalization. Our report will bring you up to speed.
Debates and speeches can let Americans know a candidate's policies, but candid conversations reveal whether they will follow through. We hear from a filmmaker who talks to presidential hopefuls. Hello, and to those of you just joining us, good morning. Welcome to NTD. I'm Kevin Hogan.
Welcome. Good morning. I'm Evelyn Lee. Let's get right into our top stories. Are young people supporting Hamas because of TikTok? A congressman is now making that case, saying the U.S. should completely ban the Chinese platform. NTD's Arian Pastar spoke with an expert on Chinese online propaganda.
Congressman Mike Gallagher wrote an op-ed for the Free Press saying many young Americans support Hamas because of TikTok. He cited a poll which says that over half of college-aged Americans say Hamas attacks on Israel on October 7th were justified. Gallagher wrote that a growing number of Americans rely on TikTok for their news. Today, TikTok is the top search engine for more than half of Gen Z. Official numbers from TikTok show that posts with the hashtag #FreePalestine are getting around 17 times more views than posts with the hashtag #StandWithIsrael. This may come to no surprise, as former leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat, visited China 14 times before he died. He met with CCP leaders, including Mao Zedong and Jiang Zemin. Congressman Gallagher wrote, "We know for a fact that the CCP uses TikTok to push its propaganda and censor views that diverge from the party line." And he concludes by saying that completely banning TikTok in the US protects our public square from the surveillance, malign influence, censorship, and propaganda of a foreign adversary.
So what role does TikTok play? We bring in Andrew Selepak to dig deeper into this question. He's a social media professor at the University of Florida. Good morning, Andrew. Really good to have you as always. Now, what do you think? Does TikTok have an anti-Semitic bias?
You know, I think we should instead look at it as people have an anti-Semitic bias. I mean, I think there's no denying the fact that for a very long time, people have been very anti-Semitic, and that's just playing out on TikTok because the platform is different than the other social media platforms that we generally see, because you have such access to the thoughts and views of people outside of your circle. TikTok's a different social media platform because you don't need to follow a single person on there to get a never-ending stream of content. Whereas with the other platforms, there's a lot more sort of the fact that you have to select who you want to follow. And what we're seeing is not so much that there's more anti-Semitism. I don't know if that's necessarily grown. It's always been a problem. Is that we're just now seeing all the people that are anti-Semitic, and that's much more visible on TikTok.
I see. That's an interesting take. And I mean, the platform, as we have just heard too, has been criticized many times in the past for being CCP backed and promoting questionable content, among other things. Now, please tell me what you know about that, and if there are any concerns about that CCP control when it comes to Hamas content as well.
Well, I think we should just be concerned about TikTok in general, from a privacy perspective of the type of content we're seeing in the algorithm, the influence of the Chinese government on that algorithm. We know it being a Chinese company that it's going to have to listen to whatever the government in China wants. So whatever the government wants is the content that's going to be seen by the people, not only in China, which is much different content than the rest of the world sees, but if they want the platform to be pro-Hamas, it will be pro-Hamas. If they want the content to be pro-Israel, it will be pro-Israel. So there is a big aspect of the government sort of putting their thumb on the scale of what people are going to see. But again, I want to make sure it's clear that it's not that anti-Semitism only exists on TikTok. It's just that the Chinese government, as opposed to the other platforms, can basically decide how much of it that people see.
I see. And because we also heard that pro-Palestine content gets more views on TikTok than, let's say, pro-Israel content. So based on what you say, would this be consistent with other platforms as well? It's just not that apparent? Or why is it a phenomenon in TikTok? Let's put it that way.
Well, you know, I can sort of speak anecdotally in terms of, I have a good friend, a tremendous person who's Jewish, and told me about the DMs that he gets on the other social media platforms of just the most vile and hateful messages possible. And that content's not being stopped by Meta. That content's not being stopped on Facebook and Instagram in terms of Meta. It exists there as well, and it's not as visible because he's getting it in DMs, and maybe you can't measure, because of the fact you can't measure DMs in the same way that you can measure the visible content. And that's sort of where it's different, because everything on TikTok is visible. Whereas, you know, people that have private accounts on these other platforms, you can't really say what they're posting, what they're talking about. It's just the visibility of the content, which is makes it so much worse. And I think what people are starting to see by stories like this and you know, members of Congress speaking up, is the sheer amount of anti-Semitism that exists in people. The sheer amount of anti-Semitism that exists on social media, but it's just the nature of TikTok that makes it different.
So should there be a response from the government then regarding social media and that content?
Well, there should have been a response from the government for the past few years. I mean, we've been talking about whether or not TikTok should be banned in the United States for 2, 3, 4 years now. It's just that Congress rarely gets anything done, and that's been the biggest problem. The additional problem, just so we're also clear with this conversation, is that young people use this platform because there's no equivalent. I've been a big proponent, and not to the fact that I have any influence on it, that Elon Musk should bring back Vine, and then we wouldn't have a lot of these same concerns. But right now there is no TikTok equivalent, and for that reason, it's a very popular app. We know that plenty of people here in the United States, potentially up to 100 million people, use it, and they'll continue to use it so long as it's available to them.
That's a very interesting take on that, and I want to leave it here. Thank you so much, Andrew Selipek. I appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
The U.S. is planning to transfer $320 million of precision-guided bomb equipment to Israel. The equipment was approved several months ago before Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. The transfer comes as several countries have called for a ceasefire in Gaza as a civilian death toll from Israeli airstrikes continue to rise. Senior U.S. officials have urged Israel to agree to humanitarian pauses to allow aid into and civilians out of Gaza. The U.S. has stopped short of calling for a ceasefire, arguing that it would benefit Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected any stop to the fighting. That's until Hamas releases the more than 200 hostages it's holding inside Gaza.
A 69-year-old Jewish man died after an altercation at a pro-Israel rally in California yesterday. The Ventura County Sheriff's Office has determined the death was a homicide and is not ruling out hate crime charges. Police say Paul Kessler got into an argument with a pro-Palestinian supporter on Sunday. During the altercation, Kessler fell backward and later died of what police are calling blunt force trauma. No suspect has been named. Police are asking for help in their investigation and plan to hold a press conference today. The incident happened as emotions are running high in the U.S. over the war between Israel and the Hamas terrorist group. And just ahead, will Governor Tate Reeves win re-election in Mississippi against Elvis Presley's second cousin, Brandon Presley? Will Ohio enshrine abortion access in the state's constitution? We look at voters' top issues on Election Day.
The third GOP debate is coming up. Get to know the presidential candidates not as authority figures, but as real people. We hear from the producer of the presidential roller coaster after the break.
The highest art is beautiful, breathtaking, timeless, and moving. Experience art with 5,000 years of history, inspired by the divine. Experience Shen Yun.
What if you could feel in control of your retirement in just a few clicks? At aceyourretirement.org, you can. Start with a free 3-minute chat with Avo, your friendly digital retirement coach. Just answer some simple questions like, how do you feel about your ability to save for retirement? Or in how many years do you want to retire? To get free action items customized just for you, get your retirement back on track at aceyourretirement.org.
To a child, this is what conflict looks like. Children in Ukraine are caught in the crossfire of war, forced to flee their homes.
A steady stream of refugees has been coming across all day. It's bitterly cold.
Lacking clean water and sanitation, exposed to injury, hunger,
exhausted and shell-shocked from what they've been through.
Every dollar you give can help bring a meal, a blanket, or simply hope to a child living in conflict. Please call or go online to GiveNowToSave.org today with your gift of $10 a month. That's just 33 cents a day. We cannot forget the children in places like Syria, born in refugee camps, playing in refugee camps, thinking of the camps as home. Please call or go online to GiveNowToSave.org today with your gift of $10 a month. Your gift can help children like Ara in Afghanistan, where nearly 20 years of conflict have forced the people into extreme poverty. Weakened and unable to hold herself up, Ara was brought to a Save the Children center where she was diagnosed and treated for severe malnutrition. Every dollar helps. Please call or go online to GiveNowToSave.org today with your gift of $10 a month, just 33 cents a day. And thanks to special government grants that are available now, every dollar you give can multiply up to 10 times the impact. And when you use your credit card, you'll receive this special Save the Children tote bag to show you won't forget the children who are living their lives in conflict. Every war is a war against children. Please, give now.
Good to have you back. Voters today will cast ballots to choose governors in Kentucky and Mississippi, decide legislative control in Virginia and New Jersey, and determine whether the Ohio state constitution should protect abortion access.
NTD's Daniel Monahan breaks down some key races.
Off-year votes get less attention than presidential and midterm congressional elections. But Republicans and Democrats will be watching some major races and key issues for clues about the 2024 elections. First up are races for governor. In Kentucky, Democratic Governor Andy Beshear is running for re-election against Republican State Attorney General Daniel Cameron in the typically conservative state. Cameron is challenging Beshear by focusing on public safety, learning loss from school closures during the COVID pandemic, and legislation opposing cross-sex procedures on minors, which Beshear vetoed. In Mississippi, Republican Governor Tate Reeves is running for re-election against Democrat Brandon Presley, a second cousin of singer Elvis Presley. Reeves has accused Presley of being backed by out-of-state liberals. Presley is running on the promise of tax cuts and expanding Medicaid. Turning to the legislature, all 40 seats in Virginia's Senate and 100 seats in the House of Delegates are up for grabs. Democrats are fighting to hold or widen their 22-18 advantage in the Senate and win a majority in the House, where Republicans have a 52-48 edge. Democrats have focused on abortion access, as Republicans have promised to pass a 15-week abortion ban if they take control of the legislature, while Republicans have focused on crime and public safety. In New Jersey, all seats in the General Assembly and Senate are in play. Republicans have gained ground in the deep blue state since 2021 when they flipped 7 seats. They are campaigning on issues ranging from the economy to parental rights. Over to ballot initiatives, Ohio voters will decide whether to enshrine abortion access rights in the state constitution and on legalizing marijuana for recreational use. And finally, to the courts. The race for a new state Supreme Court justice in Pennsylvania will not alter the liberal tilt of the state's highest court, but could have future implications for abortion access and election laws in the state. Planned Parenthood has endorsed Democratic candidate Daniel McCaffrey for the 10-year position, while pro-life groups are backing the Republican candidate Carolyn Carluccio. Democrats have a 4-2 majority in the partisan state court, with 1 vacant seat to be filled in this election. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
The third GOP presidential primary debate takes place tomorrow in Miami. The field of presidential hopefuls taking part is down to 5 candidates. There are Governor Ron DeSantis, Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, Senator Tim Scott, and Vivek Ramaswamy.
Former President Trump will skip the debate and hold a concurrent rally in Hialeah, Florida, which is near Miami.
The Republican National Committee set new qualification requirements for this debate. Candidates had to receive at least 4% in 2 national polls and get donations from a minimum of 70,000 people.
North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum didn't qualify for this debate, and former Vice President Mike Pence recently suspended his campaign.
The RNC has raised the requirements for the next debate, which may narrow the field even more.
And as the primary elections draw near, we speak to the producer of a show that's about the candidates themselves. Through candid conversations and a little bit of humor, the award-winning novelist and accomplished screenwriter allows us to meet these candidates as real people and not just authority figures. There are already 2 episodes out and more to come. Let's take a look. Please welcome Roger Simon, the host and producer of the Presidential Roller Coaster. Thank you so much for your time today, Roger. What can viewers expect to gain from watching your program that they just can't get anywhere else?
An insight to the candidates as people more than just as talking heads. I think it's a more casual approach to seeing what the presidential candidates are like, because I used to work in Hollywood, so I'm adopting the technique called cinema verite, which is like, a more real life approach rather than a formal interview such as we're having right now. There's a little bit of that, but there's also, follow them around and try to catch them, spontaneously and try to reveal who they are as people, because actually it will be as people that they sit in the White House.
So when we zoom in on your interview with candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, how is the cinema verite style used to bring out just more of their personality and help people understand them?
Well, it's interesting because some of these candidates, and Vivek is one of them, respond very well to that technique because they are actually spontaneous people. I've seen him, I've followed him quite a bit on the campaign trail, and he is able to interact with people in a very natural, informal manner. And so you see that in how he handles the situation as we moved around in Iowa where we shot this stuff. And actually Robert F. Kennedy was able to do that. Some of the candidates are actually resisting until now our technique because I think they're afraid to appear in an unbuttoned up manner.
So it's of course important to understand what the candidates' policies are, but why is it important for people to really get to know them?
Well, because you get to sense whether they will follow through. I mean, that's we've all seen things with politicians all over the world who will sit up there with jacket and tie and be very formal and say something and then do the opposite. And so revealing who the man or woman is personally gives you a clue. It's not absolute proof, but it gives you a clue to how they will actually behave in life, as opposed to, what they say they'll do.
Giving voters a little bit of insight in how they can predict what.
Yeah, I think that's really what it is, and and also it's more fun, and we hope. I put some humor into it, and sometimes the candidates respond and reveal they have a sense of humor too. It's nice for a human being to have one, as we know.
And what did you learn about candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr.?
Oh, a lot of things, but what I tell people about that interview, because he's a very smart man, and we gave him room to go back into the past, and he has a past. And one of the things about interviewing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or being with him is in a few hours you're looking at him and seeing this man has the saddest eyes I've ever seen. And why? Think about this. He was 9 years old when his uncle was shot and 15 when his father was shot. How many people have a life experience like that?
Yeah, he has definitely overcome so much. And thank you for helping us learn a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of these candidates. So, Roger Simon, producer of the Presidential Roller Coaster, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
And you can watch the Presidential Roller Coaster on EpochTV.com.
Yeah, I mean, elections can be intense, right? So a little bit of humor is definitely welcome.
Yes, and Roger Simon does a great job at bringing that in. And you know, we obviously know a lot about Trump, his policies, and of course his personal life, especially with all the court cases unfolding and everything. But it's good to hear a little bit more about maybe some of the candidates that we're not as familiar with, like Vivek Ramaswamy and so forth.
And also see them, you know, let their hair down a little bit to get them know better. Yeah, it sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, and it gets you fired up about the elections too, when you know who the players are.
Right. Well, I'll be looking out for that. But for now, we have to wrap up our show. We'll keep you updated, though, with the latest information. Stay tuned for our News Today broadcast at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching. I'm Evelyn Lee.
And I'm Kevin Hogan.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.